Hi guys, welcome back to my channel of IGCSE Economics. I'm Kyle. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics. So let's begin with the definition. So microeconomics, by its name, is the study of the behavior and decisions of households and firms and the performance of individual markets. So as I highlighted here, the keyword is individual markets, which indicates that it basically focuses on the study of a particular section of an economy, right? While macroeconomics, the definition would be the study of the whole economy. You can see the comparison here. Microeconomics is, for example, the study of this market of the lemonade, while macroeconomics is taking a step back and looking at the economy as a whole, okay? So microeconomics examines the different choices of individuals. Different choices of individuals and households and firms, and what factors influence their choices, and how their decisions affect price, demand, and supply of goods and services in a market. And lastly, how government influences consumption and production. So by contrast, macroeconomics studies the role of government in achieving its macro aims in human development through implementation of specific policies, for example, fiscal, monetary, or supply side policy, which we're going to touch on later. So here I'm just going to talk a little bit of what's macro aims. Now, government macro aims is basically achieving, for example, economic growth, or maintain a stable inflation, or reducing unemployment, stuff like that. And human development would be, for example, CPI, which is a consumer price index, and HDI, which is human development index. Okay. So yeah, that's that. And the second thing that the macroeconomics examine is the role of government achieving current account balance. Now that's something in international trade, which basically includes 4 parts, which we're going to talk about later, okay? And lastly, we have the interaction of the economy with the rest of the world through international trade. All right, so now let's introduce the decision makers in microeconomics. Now, the first one would be consumers. Now, they're basically economic agents where they consider economic activities and make decisions. That's what we call the agents, which includes consumers, firms, and households. So a consumer would consider which combination of goods and services do they value the most. Let's just click the wrong thing. They value the most, and their response to the market, or how much money do they spend, save, or borrow. Now let's just highlight this real quick. Now this is a part that I'm going to be covering later on in probably the next video. Okay, so the second job for firms is that which combination of goods and services to supply, how to produce goods and services to meet their objectives, which is how to produce here. Now the third one is the response to changing market decisions. Okay, and for government, in microeconomics, it would address policies to deal with market failure, which is their aim is to allocate resources at an efficient level in order to maximize production. And the second role is they want to provide support to specific industries. For example, those infant or those falling industries, because they want to provide protect for them in order to make sure that they're actually developing rather than falling down. So for decision makers in macroeconomics, the first 3 are basically the same, but macroeconomics has also MNCs, which is multinational companies operating also in the industry. So let's begin with consumers. It basically has the job to respond to changing macro conditions, for example, during an economic growth or a boost, or during a recession, or if there's a change in its interest rate. The consumers were going to perform differently. For example, if the interest rate is high, the consumer would tend to save more as their interest would be higher, and they want to borrow less because you have to pay back more as the interest rate goes high. So for firms, they're going to respond to changes in the macroeconomic conditions also, but here we also have the supply of labor, which firms are going to respond to, because if supply of labor is high, then obviously firm can actually lower their pay to the workers so that they can actually lower their cost of production. And the second job for firms is that they can sell products locally, nationally, or internationally. The third decision maker in macro is government, where they determine best policies to achieve macro aims. Okay, so now it's easy to actually get messed up with the roles in micro and macro, but the only thing we want to pay attention to is that, basically macro is focusing on a broader view. For example, macro aims locally, nationally, and internationally. Here it's basically the larger view, while, for example, micro, it focuses on market failure over here, or it focuses on market failure or specific industries, which are the smaller ones, like the specific market and demands. Okay, so the last one is multinational corporations, which is MNC. For example, they're going to consider which country to invest in or how to best develop international advantages and how to engage with the government and a local workforce to maximize profit and maintain a brand image. All right, so now we're going to compare the key difference between micro and macroeconomics. Microeconomics is comparing the single market. For example, this bicycle industry. They're going to consider how much people are going to buy this bicycle if I lower the price or stuff like that. While the whole macroeconomics studies the whole economy, for example, the economy of the USA. And in microeconomics, it's going to consider the price of a good and service. But in macroeconomics, what we're going to be considering is the average price levels in an economy, considering inflation and deflation. Okay. Now, in microeconomics, we're going to consider the individual and market demand and supply, but in macro, we're going to be considering the total demand, and supply. I'm just going to highlight these so that it's easier for us to, So here, single product again, and this is the average price levels. Okay, so in micro, there could be government intervention in the market. For example, you could ban the consumption of cigarette, right? But in macro, you want to implement this whole intervention in the economy where it functions to everyone equally. For example, charging on a higher income tax. So in microeconomics, you could have different wage pays, mainly deciding on their productivity or their abilities. But in macroeconomics, your aim is to deal with unemployment and minimum wages, stuff like that, because obviously that's another bigger view. Right, so now let's touch on the practice questions just to make us understand this whole concept. Now, the first question: households' decision to buy less price reduce the profit of rice farmers. When which branch of economics cover these two trend changes? So let's look at household decision. Obviously, as we mentioned before, household decision, that's a consumer, right? As I've written here, it's a consumer. So it's definitely the microeconomics because obviously the consumer are the agents who make economic decisions, as I mentioned. And rice farmers' profits, now that's a section falling onto the firm and household part, is not focusing on an international or a broad image. It's just focusing on this specific profit. So again, it's microeconomics. So the answer for this one would be A. So for the second question, who influences the total output of the Egyptian economy? Obviously here, they're again asking the total output. So here, households definitely, because they make decisions, right? And firms, obviously they do, again, and government, obviously they do because they can implement policies and subsidies in order to boost the output if they want to. So this question should be D. All right, so I think that sums the chapter of micro and macroeconomics in IGCSE. Now, it's basically a fundamental chapter, so just remember not to get messed up with these concepts because it is crucial. All right, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching this video, and remember to subscribe, like, and comment in the comment area about what we want to hear next time. Bye.